Would you sacrifice what you love most if God asked you? This was the impossible question placed before Abraham, a test so severe that it would echo through generations as the very symbol of faith and obedience. In the vast lands where the horizon kissed the sky with colors of fire and gold, Abraham once lived a quiet life, surrounded by family and the gentle comforts of his homeland. Yet everything was about to change when a voice unlike any other pierced the silence, calling him into a destiny he could not yet comprehend. That voice carried both promise and command. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." With those words came a vision beyond imagination, that his descendants would be as countless as the stars, and that nations would rise from his name. The weight of this divine promise was both terrifying and comforting, pressing on his heart with a force that demanded action. Abraham stood on the threshold of a destiny greater than himself. His faith, still young but already stirring, began to take root in the soil of obedience. Every item he packed, every farewell he spoke, became a declaration that he was willing to surrender the familiar for the unknown. The call of heaven was stronger than the pull of home, and so he obeyed. As he and his caravan departed from Haran, each step seemed to resound with invisible meaning. The sands shifted under their feet like witnesses to the beginning of a story that would shape all history. He was not simply leaving behind a home. He was stepping into a covenant, a sacred pact that bound heaven and earth together through trust. The road led him to Canaan, a land vast and filled with promise. When Abraham first set foot on its soil, it was more than territory. It was the stage of eternal covenant. Beneath the oaks of Moreh, God appeared again, reaffirming the promise of descendants and prosperity. The wind through the trees carried whispers of divine assurance, and Abraham built an altar there, sealing the sacred encounter. Yet promises are always tested. The land of abundance soon revealed its hardships. Famine swept across the fields, pushing Abraham and his household into Egypt in search of refuge. What seemed like deliverance carried its own dangers, for fear seized Abraham when he considered the beauty of Sarah, his wife, and the envy it might provoke. In his fear, he concealed the truth, and deception placed him in conflict with Pharaoh himself. But God's protection never left him. Instead of disaster, Abraham departed Egypt with greater wealth and renewed strength, learning that divine promises endure even in human weakness. His journey back to Canaan was marked by resilience, his faith tempered by trials. Still, the deepest wound in his household remained untouched: Sarah's barrenness. The promise of countless descendants seemed almost cruel when faced with the silence of empty arms. Year after year, hope stretched thin, fraying like old fabric. Faith was no longer just about land and wealth, but about believing the impossible for his family. In her weariness, Sarah offered her maidservant Hagar to Abraham, a desperate attempt to fulfill by human means what had been promised by God. From this union came Ishmael, a child both cherished and complicated. His laughter filled the tents, but his presence also ignited tensions, shadows of rivalry and doubt that pressed on Abraham's heart. The birth of Ishmael was both a sign and a struggle. He embodied the reality that divine promises are never simple and are often surrounded by human conflict. Still, Abraham held him with love, even as he longed for the child that had been promised through Sarah. The paradox of fulfillment and waiting stretched his soul in ways words could not describe. It was in this season of both joy and unrest that God appeared again, not to condemn but to reaffirm. This time, the promise would be expanded, clearer and more impossible than before. Sarah herself would bear a son. The covenant would not be fulfilled by human shortcuts, but by divine intervention that defied the limits of nature. At twilight, when the shadows lay long across the earth, God changed Abram's name to Abraham, the father of many nations. It was a transformation not only of identity, but of destiny. Alongside this, Sarah's name was also changed. for she too would be part of this eternal promise. The sign of the covenant was sealed in the flesh through circumcision, an unshakable reminder etched into their very being that God's word was unbreakable and his promises certain. The weight of God's renewed promise rested heavily on Abraham and Sarah. At first, Sarah laughed when she heard that in her old age she would carry a child. The very thought seemed absurd, almost mocking her years of waiting. Yet beneath her laughter was a flicker of longing, a secret hope buried under years of disappointment. God's words, however, were clear. Nothing is too difficult for him. That laughter of disbelief would soon become laughter of pure joy. In due time, the impossible became reality. Sarah conceived, and the tents of Abraham were filled with expectation. When Isaac was born, the child of promise, every cry and every breath of the infant carried divine significance. Sarah's laughter transformed into uncontainable celebration, and Abraham, at 100 years old, looked upon his son as living proof that God's word never fails. The birth of Isaac changed everything. Daily routines that once seemed heavy with waiting were now brightened by the sound of a child's voice. The family, though aged, was renewed in spirit, revolving their lives around the miracle they held in their arms. Abraham's faith, tested through many seasons, had now found a new anchor in the Son of Promise. Yet joy often walks hand in hand with tension. The presence of Ishmael, Abraham's older son, cast a shadow over the household. Rivalries arose, subtle but real, as the question of inheritance and favor lingered in the air. Sarah's protective heart for Isaac clashed with the reality of Hagar and Ishmael, creating divisions that pierced Abraham's soul. It was a reminder that God's promises unfold in ways far beyond human understanding. The blessing was never meant to exclude, yet it followed a line chosen by God, not man. Abraham loved both sons, but he could not dictate the terms of the covenant. It was God who held the pen that wrote his family's destiny. In the stillness of an ordinary morning, the most unimaginable command came. God spoke again, and this time the request carried the full weight of heaven's test. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him on a mountain I will show you." The words must have struck Abraham like thunder, echoing in his heart with a heaviness beyond description. How could the promise be fulfilled if the son of promise was to be laid upon the altar? The contradiction cut deeper than any blade. Yet Abraham, though broken inside, did not argue. At dawn he rose, saddled his donkey, gathered the wood, and set out with Isaac. Each step up the mountain was a silent battle between love and obedience. Isaac walked beside his father, carrying the wood of his own sacrifice, unaware of the gravity of their mission. At one point, he turned and asked the piercing question, "Father, here is the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" The words must have pierced Abraham's heart like an arrow. Yet, with a voice heavy with faith and sorrow, he replied, "God himself will provide the lamb, my son." On the mountain, Abraham built an altar, arranging the wood carefully with trembling hands. He bound Isaac, the son of laughter, the miracle child, and placed him upon the altar. Every motion tore at his soul, but still he raised the knife, ready to do the unthinkable, believing somehow that God could still fulfill his promise, even through death. And then it happened. The voice of heaven broke through the silence. "Abraham, Abraham!" An angel of the Lord called out urgently, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Relief, awe, and tears flowed all at once as Abraham lowered the blade, overwhelmed by the mercy of God. Nearby, caught in a thicket, was a ram. Abraham took the animal and offered it in place of his son. That place was named "The Lord Will Provide," a name that carried the eternal truth that God's promises are upheld not by human strength, but by divine provision. The sacrifice had been demanded, but in the end, God himself supplied the offering. Father and son descended the mountain together, their bond unbreakable. their hearts changed forever. Abraham's faith, once tested to the very edge of human endurance, emerged as a testimony for all generations. That trust in God requires surrender, but in surrender lies the greatest revelation of his power and mercy. After the trial on Mount Moriah, Abraham's life took on a quieter rhythm, though his heart remained deeply marked by the events that had unfolded. He had faced the ultimate test and discovered a truth that would never leave him. God provides even when the path seems impossible. The memory of that day lived within him like fire, a reminder that faith is not simply belief in promises, but trust in the one who makes them. Time passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the circumstances of Abraham's household. Joy was shadowed by sorrow when Sarah, his beloved companion, passed away in Hebron. The loss was profound, for she had been not only his wife, but also the partner of his journey of faith. Her absence left the camp silent, and even Isaac, grown into a young man, felt the weight of grief pressing upon his soul. To honor Sarah, Abraham purchased the cave of Machpelah from the Hittites, paying its price with fairness and respect. This act was more than securing a burial site. It was the first tangible claim to the land God had promised him. That cave became not only Sarah's resting place, but also a sacred symbol that God's covenant was unfolding, one step at a time. As Abraham aged, his thoughts turned toward the future of Isaac, the son of promise. The covenant would continue through him, and Abraham understood that Isaac needed a wife who shared in the same faith and values. He refused to let his son be joined with the surrounding Canaanite tribes, for the promise was too precious to be entangled with influences that did not honor the Lord. So Abraham entrusted his most faithful servant with a mission of utmost importance: to journey back to his homeland and find a wife for Isaac among his own kin. With gifts, prayers, and faith, the servant departed, traveling across deserts and hills, guided by the God who had guided his master. At a well in the evening light, he prayed for a sign, asking that the chosen woman would show kindness not only to him, but also to his camels. His prayer was answered almost immediately. Rebekah appeared, carrying her jar, and with grace she offered him water and also drew water for his animals until they were satisfied. This simple act of hospitality revealed her heart, and the servant knew that the hand of God had directed him. With gratitude, he bowed and blessed the Lord who had not abandoned his promise. Rebekah's family, after hearing the servant's mission, recognized the divine hand in the encounter. With courage and faith, Rebekah agreed to leave her home and journey toward a destiny greater than herself. She mounted the camels and set out for Canaan, carrying with her not only her belongings, but also the continuation of God's covenantal story. Meanwhile, Isaac was walking in the fields, meditating at dusk, when he saw the caravan returning. Rebekah descended from her camel, veiled in respect, and the two met with a connection that was immediate and profound. Isaac took her into his mother's tent, and through her presence he found comfort after Sarah's death. Their union was not only a marriage, but also the next chapter in the unfolding promise given to Abraham. Abraham, now advanced in years, looked upon Isaac and Rebekah with gratitude. He had witnessed the faithfulness of God from the beginning to the end of his journey. Though his body was frail, his spirit was strong, for he had seen the impossible made possible, the unseen become reality. He provided gifts for his other sons and sent them to the east, ensuring peace for Isaac's inheritance, while keeping his eyes fixed on the covenant that remained unbroken. In his final days, Abraham reflected on the path he had walked. From leaving his homeland with nothing but faith to becoming the father of nations, from doubting in his heart to lifting the knife over Isaac with trembling obedience. His life was a testament carved into history, showing that true faith means surrendering to God's will even when understanding fails. When he passed away at a ripe old age, Abraham was laid to rest beside Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. In the moment of reconciliation and unity, both Isaac and Ishmael came together to bury their father, bridging the wounds of the past under the shadow of eternity. His legacy lived on not only through his children, but through every generation that would look back and learn from his journey of faith. The story of Abraham is not only about promises fulfilled long ago, but about the living truth that faith and obedience still open the door to divine provision today. It calls us to trust when the path is unclear, to believe when hope seems gone, and to follow the voice of God, no matter how great the cost. If this story moved your heart, I invite you to join this journey of faith with us. Subscribe and continue walking through these powerful lessons that shape lives even now.